Hi guys, this is Mo Volans back for Audiotuts.com with another electronic music tutorial. This time we're going to be looking at how to create hypnotic rhythmical vocal grooves. And these are especially useful for using in the introduction of, say, a house track or an electronica track. In the past, I've done sort of glitch techniques, vocal cut-ups and complex cut-ups, written tutorials. And this really isn't related to that. This is more of a simple sort of subliminal technique that realistically I've probably been using since the 90s. And you may be wondering if I've been using it that long and, you know, it's not really a secret. This is a technique that quite a lot of producers use. Why is it still valid and why is it still relevant? Well, it's something that's never really going to die. It's just a really useful, solid foundation technique. And what it does is it enables you to introduce a vocal element, and that's what we've got here. You can see it in the red. You zoom in a little bit. In, say, a remix or a vocal track. Here's my main vocal, by the way, which I'm not going to play you for copyright reasons, but just to let you know, this little clip did come out of it, so you can guess what it is yourselves if you like. But basically, if you've got a vocal like this, a full vocal, in a remix or an original production or whatever you like, and you're making a house mix, say, and you want to bring in the vocal subliminally at the beginning, let me get the pronunciation right, and you want to sort of introduce it slowly. So rather than just sort of bringing it in, this is a great way to sort of, you know, bring it in underneath, if you like. And before I show you the technique, and really what I did was I copied the main vocal track. If we open the mixer up here, you can see here, here's the main vocal track, and then I just copied the track again with all the same processes on and added a few extras. We'll look at those in a minute. But before we look at the individual automation and the processing going on, I'll just play you what it sounds like currently. Now, this is a work in progress, so nothing's really labeled. You can see it's all sort of a little bit messy, but it is just a sketch at the minute. But this should give you an idea of what we're going to be looking at, so listen out for it. Okay, so you can really see it's a very simple thing, but there's really two things that work with this sort of technique. There's two things you need to employ: a repetitive groove and some dynamic automation. When you've got those two things sort of married correctly, it can work really well and it becomes very hypnotic. Some spatial effects on the automation, and then just the right section of vocal repeated at different frequencies maybe, but it's just those two things in contrast work very well. So the way you would go about it is choose a section of vocal to start with. And I honestly do this by sort of visual feedback. You may think I go through and sort of listen to every section, but really I don't. I'd probably cut out a bar from, like, you know, several different areas. So like this, you know, just take an interesting looking bar or maybe half a bar and then just bring it in and copy it. Okay. In Logic, obviously, you can just loop it. But this is the bar that I chose. And I tried about 5 or 6 different sections before I got the one that I wanted. And this is the one that worked for me. It's very subjective, but I would suggest that if it's, you know, rhythmically pleasing and it's tuneful and, you know, you're not catching the end of a sort of a melodic, you know, sequence, then it's going to work pretty well. And this is what I came up with. I'll just take the processing off so you can hear the whole thing in isolation. I'll even take the automation off and the send. So this is totally dry and isolated.
You built my heart, records. You get my heart records. You get my heart records. You get my heart records.
Now, any effects you can hear there are imprinted into the file because it may have been a recording before I picked it up. So that delay you can hear is actually in the sample, so, which is quite cool because it adds another edge. But of course, if you were going to do this with your own vocal, it would probably be a lot cleaner. Then some pitch corrections added just because it was on the original vocal, so it stayed on when I copied the track across. The all-important filter, which I'll keep open because we're going to look at that in a second. Some low-cut filtering, some high-pass filtering at about 200 hertz to get rid of any unwanted low frequencies. The all-important compressor, which is a Teletronics LA2A, one of the, how do I put this, newer ones from UAD, but it is an actual emulation of an older unit. Okay, so it's a classic emulation of a valve compressor, and we've got a great delay from the FabFilter Timeless 2, which is just a really spacey delay. And finally, in the chain, we've got an insert reverb, which adds some random hall reverb from the new Softube Stroke Native Instruments RC48, which is a really nice little plugin, which comes with Complete 8 Ultimate. Then we've got a send as well. Now let me show you the send. This is going to this mass reverb, it says here, but ultimately it's just a really big reverb from the UAD Dreamverb at full wet mix, obviously, because it's a return, and it's got about an 11-second decay on it. So, you know, I'll show you why it's such a huge reverb in just a second. After that, there's a low cut just to get rid of subsonics. Okay, so after this is repeated, automation is then we start to build up automation. And first of all, the main automation really is the filter cutoff. Now we start off at about 250 hertz. What this means is that when it's in the mix, you don't really hear it when it first comes in. Now if I solo it, you can hear it, it is there. What this does is, it makes it feel like the vocal comes out of nowhere, because when it comes in this section, you do pick it up subconsciously in the groove. As it fades in, it starts to rise and come out of the mix, but it's already been there, so it's not a big surprise. And because it comes in on a transitional section, it's almost like you don't notice it. So let's hear it in the mix, and you should see what I mean. You can see the filter frequency moving up here. You start hearing it around here at about 300 or 400 hertz. And it's really starting to come out into the mix now. New drum loop is introduced. Now you can hear other automation going on there, and that is the send reverb. And you can see it dying down there, in fact. This is a really huge reverb, and what it does is it sort of smooths over the transition a little. So we've got some reverb building up here, and then again into the second transition. Now if I was to sort of cut back this section here, you'll hear why it's important to have this sort of reverb or effect, especially in such a sort of stripped down track with a reasonably epic feel. You can hear that reverb there. Really goes some way to smoothing the gap. And I'll let these play back here. You can hear more reverb there. So these reverb automations really help to smooth over transitional sections and just make it a little bit more fluid. So the two together, you've got frequency automation, you've got reverb automation, you've got your repetitive groove that's reasonably carefully chosen out of several sort of options. You can always try different variations once you've got your channel strip set up, and something as simple as this can be as effective as putting sort of fading in a drum loop. But what it means is that you're using the same vocal as you're going to use later in the track. You've introduced the idea of it being a vocal track to your listener, and it's not a huge surprise once the vocal drops. which I find is always a really nice thing in a vocal remix. So try it yourselves. Hopefully this has been useful to you. If you are a remixer or you're working on sort of, simple stripped down sort of electronica tracks with vocals in. If you've got any ideas for future tutorials, please drop them in the comments and I'll try and get them sorted for you. Otherwise, I'll carry on showing you some of the things I'm working on in my own projects and with my students. And watch out for the quick tips that I'm working on currently that should be up on the site shortly.